Imagine coming home after a long day, only to find a stranger's car sitting inside your garage. Not just any stranger, the HOA Karen who thinks the entire neighborhood belongs to her. I confronted her, and do you know what she said? "Oh, relax, you weren't using it." As if my property was her private parking space. But that wasn't even the shocking part. She kept doing it, day after day, laughing each time I complained. And the HOA? They sided with her, claiming she had temporary permission. That's when I realized something. If nobody was going to protect my property, I'd protect it myself. So the next time she parked her car inside my garage, I quietly shut the door, locked it tight, and left for a 2-week vacation. But what happened while I was gone, what she did out of pure panic, and the massive HOA scandal it exposed, was something none of us. I never imagined something as simple as a garage could pull me into the ugliest conflict of my life. But looking back, it didn't start with the garage. It started with something much smaller. Something most people would ignore. It was the 2nd month in my new home. I had just moved into a quiet cul-de-sac, hoping for peace after leaving a loud apartment building behind. I wanted space. Calm. A neighborhood where people minded their own business. I was tired of hearing fights through paper-thin walls, tired of landlords who didn't care, tired of neighbors who treated every hallway like their personal trash can. So when I bought this place, I promised myself, this time will be different. This time I'll have peace. I didn't know yet that the real noise wasn't made by loud music or apartment parties. Sometimes the loudest disturbance comes from a person who smiles too hard, watches too closely, and inserts themselves into your life without ever being invited. That person was Karen. Or as the whole neighborhood quietly called her, HOA Karen. The first time I met her, she showed up at my door before I even finished unpacking. She knocked with this strange rhythm, sharp, impatient taps. When I opened the door, she didn't greet me. She didn't say, "Welcome." Not even, "Hello." Instead, she looked around me, scanning inside my home as if she was a health inspector checking for violations. "You're the new owner," she said flatly. I nodded. "Yeah, just moved in." She didn't smile. "Well, I'm Karen, HOA board member. I like to make sure everyone knows the rules around here." Rules. Her favorite word. I forced a polite smile. "Sure. Anything important I should know?" She reached into a folder she carried against her chest. Yes, a literal folder. Pulled out a packet of printed papers, and handed it to me like she was giving me a court summons. "These are the regulations. Trash rules, lawn care standards, parking expectations, garage requirements, and general behavioral guidelines." Behavioral guidelines? For adults. But I didn't want conflict, so I nodded. "Thanks. I'll take a look." She stared at me another second, as if waiting for me to make a mistake right there on the spot. Then she gave a tight smile, the kind with no warmth behind it, and walked away. I remember closing the door and letting out a long breath. I told myself she was just overly involved. Some people need control to feel secure. Fine. I could handle that. But that was the first sign. The first ripple before the wave. I didn't know then that she had a habit of inserting herself into situations that didn't concern her. I didn't know she had keys to homes she wasn't supposed to have keys to. I didn't know she treated the HOA rules as her personal weapon. And I definitely didn't know she had a history of using other people's property whenever she felt like it. All I knew was, I had moved into a house with a garage that I was excited to finally use. My garage wasn't big. 1 car. A little space for storage. Just enough for someone like me, who liked things organized and simple. For weeks, everything was fine. I woke up, went to work, came home, parked my car, closed the garage, and lived my life quietly. But then, little things started happening. The first thing I noticed was a faint tire mark on the garage floor near the wall, not in the place where my car rested. My car tires always landed in the same spot, like muscle memory. That new mark wasn't mine. I brushed it off. Maybe the movers made it. Maybe I just didn't remember it being there. A few days later, I noticed the garage lock felt slightly loose. Not broken. Not forced. Just different. As if someone had used it recently. Someone other than me. Again, I tried to stay rational. New house. New routines. Maybe it was me. Then the weird noises started. Twice, I heard a faint metal clink from the garage late at night while I was upstairs. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just subtle enough to make me second-guess myself. The first night, I thought maybe something shifted on a shelf. The second night, I paused the show I was watching because I was sure someone had opened the garage door. But when I checked, nothing. Everything looked normal. And then came the incident I couldn't ignore. One Sunday morning, I opened the garage door to leave for groceries. As the door rose, sunlight spilled in, and something looked different. My workbench. A small wooden bench I used for simple repairs. It had been moved. Only a few inches. But I knew exactly where it always sat. I had lined it up evenly with the wall so I could open my car door without hitting it. Now it was out of place. I stood there, staring at it, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But the more I looked, the more a cold feeling crept up my spine. No. This wasn't imagination. Someone had been inside. I stepped out of the garage and walked around to the driveway, searching for any signs, tire marks, footprints, anything. There was nothing obvious, but the feeling didn't go away. The entire day felt off. Every time I heard a sound outside, I found myself glancing toward the garage door. That night, I sat on my couch with the garage on my mind, replaying all the signs I had dismissed. The tire mark. The loose lock. The noises. The moved bench. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Something was happening. But the thought that someone in the neighborhood was entering my garage, it made me feel sick. Violated. Angry. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some explanation I just wasn't seeing yet. I decided to do something simple. I took a small, nearly invisible piece of tape and placed it across the inside hinge of the garage door. So small that nobody would notice it, but big enough that if the door opened, the tape would break. It was a quiet way of answering the question that had been haunting me. Is someone going into my garage? The next morning, I left for work and tried not to think about it. But all day, the tape was on my mind. When I returned home that evening, I parked in the driveway first instead of pulling straight into the garage. I walked over, lifted the garage door manually just a few inches to check the hinge. The tape was broken. Split cleanly. Not fallen. Not peeling off. Broken. Someone had opened my garage while I was gone. I froze. A shock went through my chest. Not panic, but something heavier. A cold realization. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was someone intentionally entering my property. And there was only one person in the neighborhood who acted like she had authority to do anything she wanted. Karen. But why? Why my garage? Why my home? I didn't confront her that night. I needed proof. I needed a plan. And most importantly, I needed to stay calm. What I didn't know yet was that the situation was about to escalate in a way I never imagined. Because the next time I opened my garage, her car would be sitting inside it. And that moment would change everything. The morning it happened started like any other. Quiet. Calm. Normal. One of those mornings where nothing feels strange, and you don't expect the world to suddenly twist sideways. I woke up early, made coffee, and planned to leave for work ahead of schedule. I remember thinking, maybe today will be better. Maybe the broken tape had been a fluke. Maybe I was overthinking everything. I wanted, desperately, to believe that. But when I stepped outside and hit the garage button on the wall, everything inside me froze. Because as the door slowly lifted, revealing the shadows beneath it, I saw something I knew instantly did not belong to me. A white SUV. Parked perfectly. Angled like it had been there for hours. And not just any SUV. Karen's SUV. Her license plate was unmistakable. She had a custom plate with her initials, large, bold lettering, like her ego needed physical space. For a full 3 seconds, I just stood there, staring, unable to process what I was seeing. I didn't blink. Didn't breathe. My garage. My private, locked garage. With someone else's car sitting inside it. It felt like someone had punched me straight in the chest. I took a step forward, mechanical, as if my body was moving before my mind caught up. The SUV wasn't just parked in the center. It was parked comfortably, casually, like she had done this before. I circled around the car, checking every angle, my pulse rising with every detail. The garage door had no signs of force. No scratches. No damage. Whoever entered had used a key, or something close to it. That realization made my skin crawl. Someone had access. Someone was letting themselves in. Someone who believed they had the right. And there was only one person bold enough to do that. I walked around the back of the SUV, and on the passenger seat, I saw a bright orange binder. Her HOA binder. The one she always carried around like it was the Constitution. That confirmed it. I stepped back out of the garage and closed the door halfway, enough to hide the car from the street but not enough to lock it. I needed a second to collect myself, because anger was already boiling inside me, mixing with shock and confusion. I paced across my driveway, breathing hard. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from being violated in such a personal, intimate way. This wasn't just a parking issue. This was trespassing. This was entitlement. This was someone believing they owned parts of my home because they sat on a board. And worst of all, I had no idea how long this had been going on. Had she been parking in here while I was at work? While I was out running errands? Had she been inside while I was asleep? The thought made my stomach turn. I needed answers. And only one person could give them to me. I stormed across the cul-de-sac and marched straight to her house. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached her porch, I didn't knock politely. I knocked hard. Firm. 3 sharp hits that echoed through the wood. It took her a moment to open the door. But when she did, she didn't look surprised. Not at all. She stood there holding a mug, wearing a robe, looking relaxed, as if she had been expecting me. "Oh, hello," she said, sipping her drink. "Something wrong?" Her voice was sweet in the most fake way imaginable. A sugary poison. I clenched my jaw. My garage. Your car. Why is it in there? She raised her eyebrows, unfazed. As I said before, we have community rules about parking. You weren't using the garage. And the HOA allowed temporary use. I stared at her, stunned. Allowed? Allowed by who? I own that garage. She shrugged lightly, like this was all normal. The board approved my request. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. You are the board. You can't approve yourself. Her face stiffened just a little. I have the right, she said coolly. And besides, it's only temporary. You weren't using the space efficiently, and I needed the garage to protect my vehicle from the sun. My anger rose like a wave ready to crash. Using it efficiently? I echoed. It's my property. I can use it or not use it however I want. She gave me that smirk, the one I had seen several times since moving in. A smug, dismissive expression that made my fists clench. You need to calm down, she said slowly, condescendingly. Getting emotional won't solve anything. I took a breath, keeping my voice steady. I want you to move your car. Right now. She looked almost amused. I'm busy at the moment. Maybe later. No, I snapped. Now. But she shook her head lightly, stepping back. I'll come get it when I'm ready. It's not hurting anything. And with that, she closed the door. She literally closed the door in my face. I stood there on her porch, stunned into silence. Not because she won the argument, she didn't. But because she didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing. I walked back toward my house, each step heavier than the last. My hands were cold. My chest was tight. I felt humiliated, violated, disrespected, all at once. When I got back to my driveway, I stared at my still open garage, her SUV sitting inside like it belonged there. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I needed proof. She wasn't going to stop. She didn't believe she was wrong. She wasn't even embarrassed. I called the HOA hotline, hoping someone else on the board would step in. The call went to a voicemail that sounded suspiciously like it had been recorded in a bathroom. Nobody called back. Later that afternoon, I walked to a neighbor's house, someone I had spoken to a few times. An older man named Tom who always worked on his garden. When he saw my face, he put down his shovel. "You look like you're about to explode," he said. "She parked in my garage," I said bluntly. He wiped his hands on his jeans. "Karen. Who else?" He sighed. A long, tired sigh that told me he'd been through something similar. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "But you might be the first to catch her." That made my heart skip. "What do you mean?" He looked around, as if checking to make sure she wasn't listening. "She used to use the Petrovich family's shed. Told them it was allowed to. She got into their backyard at least twice. Uses HOA power to get what she wants." The pieces were coming together, slowly at first, then all at once. She wasn't careless. She wasn't confused. She wasn't misguided. She was calculated, entitled. And she believed she was untouchable. That night, I sat in my living room, going over everything in my head. She had access to my garage. She had keys, or a master opener. She was using my property without permission. The HOA wasn't going to help. The neighbors feared her. And if I didn't do something, she would keep walking all over me. But here's the thing about people like Karen, they always push too far. They always underestimate the quiet ones. They always believe they're safe, until the day they aren't. I looked out the window toward my garage and made a silent promise to myself. This ends now. And it ends on my terms. What happened next wasn't planned. Not at first. Not deliberately. But it turned into something that would give me the one thing Karen never expected. Leverage. Real leverage. And by the time she realized it, it was already too late. The morning after she slammed the door in my face, I woke up with one thought repeating in my head like a heartbeat. I need proof. Solid proof. Not just her car sitting there. Not just my word against hers. Because with people like Karen, the truth means nothing unless it's documented. She twisted every story. She controlled the narrative. She talked over people until they gave up. She smiled while doing it. So I started simple. I took photos of her SUV in my garage. Every angle. Wide shots. Close shots. Shots of the license plate. The HOA binder visible inside. Then I did something I had never done before. I went through the HOA rules myself. All 47 pages. Line by line. Slowly. I sat on my couch with a cup of cold coffee, flipping through those pages, and something became clear. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, giving the HOA, or any member, the right to use another person's property. Not even temporarily. Not even with verbal approval. If anything, the rules made it worse for her. Violations included unauthorized entry into private property, misuse of HOA authority, security breach, abuse of position, all with hefty penalties. She wasn't just breaking the rules. She was destroying them. But she didn't care, because she was certain nobody would challenge her. I needed more than photos. I needed something that proved she did this intentionally, repeatedly, confidently. So I decided to check something I had ignored from the start: my garage opener. I kept the spare opener inside a small box in my laundry room. It was supposed to be brand new, still sealed in a plastic wrapper. But when I opened the drawer, the wrapper was torn. Not ripped aggressively, just split across the top, like someone had carefully opened it and then tucked it back inside to look untouched. My stomach dropped. She had been inside my house. Not just the garage. My actual house. I felt a chill spread from my chest down to my fingertips. The room seemed smaller. The air heavier. I whispered out loud, "No, no way." But deep down, I knew. The evidence was right there. She had entered, taken the opener, copied the code, used it freely. I gripped the plastic in my hands, feeling the edges dig into my skin as anger rose in me. This wasn't parking. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a serious invasion of privacy, a violation of safety. And suddenly it made sense why she wasn't afraid of me. Why she didn't flinch when I confronted her. Why she closed the door so casually. She knew she could get in whenever she wanted. That was the moment when fear joined the anger. Because if she had keys or access codes to my home, what else could she do? What else had she already done? I sat down, forced myself to breathe, and made a decision. I needed a security camera. Now. Not a basic one. A discreet one. Something hidden. I drove to a nearby electronics store and bought a tiny camera designed to look like a regular phone charger. It worked silently. Connected to an app. Recorded movement. Perfect. I plugged it into the wall opposite the garage door opener, angled just right. Anyone entering would be caught on camera instantly. For the rest of that day, I barely moved from my living room. I kept my phone on my lap, screen on, watching the live camera feed like it was a lifeline. Hours passed. Nothing happened. By evening, I started convincing myself that Karen wouldn't push further now that I had confronted her. I was wrong. At 12:43 a.m. exactly, I heard the faintest click. So soft it could have been a leaf hitting the siding. But I knew that sound. I had heard it before. I grabbed my phone and looked at the camera feed. The garage door opener LED blinked. A figure slipped inside. I froze. The camera captured everything clearly, thanks to the night vision. Karen, holding a flashlight. Moving slowly, quietly, like someone who'd done this many times. She walked straight to the center of the garage, looked around as if making sure I wasn't hiding inside, and then approached the shelves along the wall. She didn't touch my car. She didn't even glance at it. Instead, she rifled through my shelves, boxes, containers, tools, like she was searching for something. My chest tightened. My jaw locked. She wasn't parking. She wasn't hiding her car for shade. She was snooping. And based on her movements, she wasn't doing it out of curiosity. She was looking for something specific. After a minute, she opened a small plastic bin I used for storing utility items. She dug through it, moved things around, and then, she took something out. I leaned in closer to the screen. It was a spare house key. A backup I kept taped under the lid for emergencies. She pocketed it smoothly, like she'd done it before. My entire body went cold. It wasn't just trespassing now. It was premeditated. Calculated. She had been building access. Collecting keys. Creating opportunities. After pocketing the key, she walked back to the SUV. Yes, she had parked it outside this time. Opened the back door, grabbed a folder, and returned it to my shelf. A folder. She put something back into my garage. I paused the footage, zoomed in. It was a white folder with tabs. What the hell was she planting in my home? Was she trying to frame me? Hide something incriminating? Or was she storing documents she didn't want in her own house? The possibilities spun through my mind like a storm. After she placed it there, she wiped the shelf lightly, as if removing fingerprints. Then she left. Calmly. Confidently. I sat in the dark, phone in my hand, hands shaking harder than before. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't worried. She acted like she owned the place. And for the first time since moving in, I felt truly unsafe in my own home. But one thing about fear, once you get past the initial wave, something else takes over. Resolve. Determination. Clarity. She crossed into a territory she had no right to enter. She took my key. She planted something in my garage. She violated every boundary imaginable. And instead of breaking me, it gave me purpose. I waited until sunrise. Then I went to the garage. The white folder was right where she put it. I opened it slowly, expecting, I don't know, fake complaints, illegal documents, maybe something tied to HOA finances. But what I found made my jaw drop open. It was a collection of printed emails, letters, and photos, all documenting other neighbors' violations. Private information. Notes in her handwriting. Warnings that had never been sent. Pictures of backyards. Photos of doors. Homes. Cars. People. She kept files on everyone. Actual dossiers. And worse, there were emails discussing HOA decisions that were never approved by any vote. All fake. All created by her. She had been manipulating the entire neighborhood for years. Using personal info. Holding leverage. Threatening without threats. All quietly, sneakily, behind the scenes. And she used my garage as her hiding spot. I stared at the stack of papers, heart pounding. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't even about parking anymore. This was a person who treated the entire neighborhood like her personal kingdom, and everyone else like her pawns. For the first time since moving in, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear. Not anger. Control. I had something she never wanted anyone to find. Proof of her abuse of power. Evidence of her lies. I closed the folder, set it on the workbench, and whispered to myself, "You messed with the wrong house, Karen." Because now, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. And I was done playing nice. I didn't sleep much that night. Even though the fines were cancelled, my mind kept replaying the meeting. The president's face. The quiet threats. The neighbors who looked scared to stand up. The feeling that I was now on some secret list inside their office. I kept thinking, they won't stop. This isn't over. And I was right. The next morning, I went out to get my mail, and I noticed something strange. The small bush near my mailbox, one I had planted just a month earlier, was crushed. Completely. It looked like someone had stomped on it deliberately. For a second, I stood there silently, staring at it, trying not to jump to conclusions. Then I saw the tire marks. Someone had driven their golf cart or little utility vehicle from the HOA directly over it. It couldn't be an accident. There was no reason for anyone to come that close to my mailbox. My driveway wasn't even near that area. I bent down and touched the broken branches. They were still fresh. My jaw tightened. Okay. So this is how it's going to be. I went inside and told Emily. She frowned, shook her head slowly, and said what I was afraid to admit out loud. They're trying to provoke you. She wasn't wrong. The timing was too perfect. Right after I embarrassed them in a room full of homeowners? Of course they wanted to remind me who controlled the neighborhood. But I didn't react. Not the way they hoped. I cleaned it up, took pictures, documented everything, and continued with my day. For the next week, everything seemed calm. Too calm. The type of silence that only feels like a warning. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, something new happened. I received another notice from the HOA in the mail. Not a fine. Not a warning. Something stranger. A letter stating that the HOA would be conducting an exterior compliance inspection of my property due to multiple anonymous complaints. I read it 3 times. I hadn't violated any rules. Nothing had changed on my property except the bush they crushed. It was obvious what they were doing. They couldn't find me now, they knew I'd fight back, so they wanted to come snooping around, digging for something they could twist into a violation. I stood in the kitchen reading the letter, and for the first time, I felt genuinely angry. Not annoyed. Not irritated. Angry. Because this wasn't about lawns, bushes, trash cans, or any rule in the handbook. This was about power. It was about control. It was about a group of people who were used to everyone keeping their heads down. I wasn't one of them, and that made me their enemy. I sat down, took a deep breath, and cleared my mind. Then I did something they weren't expecting. I called the county property inspector. I explained that my HOA was planning an inspection and that I wanted an official opinion on my property beforehand. I told them I wanted to make sure everything on my land was in compliance with county codes so the HOA couldn't twist anything. The inspector was surprisingly friendly. He came the next morning. Walked the property. Checked everything: setbacks, drainage, fencing height, even some things I never knew were regulated. After about 40 minutes he said, "Your property is perfectly fine. No issues at all." He even gave me a signed report. I had no idea how valuable that paper would be. 2 days later, the HOA inspection team arrived. 3 board members, including the president. Clipboards in hand. No smiles. No greetings. Just slow, judgmental scans of everything they could see. I didn't let them onto my property. They had no legal right without a violation on record. I knew that now. They stood on the sidewalk, whispering to each other, pointing at random things. My gutter, my porch light, even the pattern of the stones in my walkway. After 10 minutes, the president looked at me with that smug expression and said, "We'll be mailing our findings shortly." I smiled politely. Not sarcastic. Not provoking. Just calm. And I think that bothered him more than anything. 3 days later, the letter arrived. They claimed my fence appeared slightly discolored. My trash cans might be visible from an angle during certain hours. My driveway had a minor surface crack. My porch light did not match the community's uniform aesthetic. My lawn showed early signs of patchiness. Not one of these things broke any HOA rule. They were vague observations designed to scare me into submission. At the bottom, it said, "If not corrected within 14 days, fines may be assessed." And that was the moment something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to be bullied. I wasn't going to be intimidated. I wasn't going to let a handful of retirees with clipboards dictate how I lived in my own home. So I opened my drawer, pulled out the county inspection report, attached it to an email, added the HOA's letter, and wrote one simple message: "Your inspection findings are invalid. My property has been professionally inspected and cleared. Any further harassment will be forwarded to county officials and my attorney." I sent it to the entire board. I didn't CC them. I BCC'd them all so each one knew I deliberately sent it to everyone at once. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my neighbor Mark, the one who had warned me. He said, "What did you do? The board is losing it right now." I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I actually laughed. Another hour passed, and I received a reply from the HOA's president. A short, stiff message: "We will review the county report and advise further." He wasn't used to people fighting back. He wasn't used to losing. The shift in tone was obvious. But I wasn't done yet. Something wasn't adding up. These people were too defensive. Too aggressive. Too eager to hide things. And if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this: when someone fights this hard to shut you down, they're usually hiding something much deeper. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to discover the secret the HOA never wanted anyone to know. And once I found it, everything changed. When the HOA scheduled the official hearing, I expected a normal, calm discussion where things would finally be settled. But what actually happened inside that room felt like the entire story folding back on itself. Like every lie, every petty action, every threat that Karen had thrown my way was suddenly coming home to roost. And, honestly, I wasn't expecting what happened next. Not this much. Not this fast. Not this publicly. But before I tell you what happened at the hearing, let me tell you about the week leading up to it. Because that week showed me something important. When people realize the truth, their behavior suddenly changes. Her attitude changed overnight after the board announced they were investigating her for unauthorized property use, harassment, and misuse of HOA authority. Karen became quiet. Not just regular quiet. Ghost quiet. The woman who used to walk around correcting people's grass height now crossed the street to avoid seeing me. She stopped patrolling the neighborhood with her clipboard. She even stayed inside most days. I'd see her blinds move, like she was watching the world stressfully, waiting for the moment everything collapsed. She wasn't the loud, fearless, I own this neighborhood, Karen anymore. She was a nervous person realizing she had pushed the wrong person too far. But I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even thinking about revenge. I just wanted the truth out, and my peace back. That's all. The neighborhood started whispering my neighbors, who once treated her like some sort of self-appointed queen, suddenly weren't so loyal. I'd take out the trash, and someone would walk up to me and say, "I heard about the garage situation. I can't believe she did that." Or, "She's been bullying people for years. We're glad someone finally stood up." It felt strange. For months, I thought I was fighting alone. But now I realized everyone had a story. Everyone had been targeted by her in some way. A woman 2 houses down told me, she once tried to fine me for having my niece's bike outside for 10 minutes. Another neighbor said, she threatened to report me because my dog barked once, at a squirrel. It hit me then, Karen wasn't powerful. She was just loud. And everyone was tired of her. The day of the HOA hearing arrived, I walked into the community center room. A long table sat in the front with the board members. A few chairs were set up for attendees. More people showed up than I expected, neighbors who wanted to see justice happen. Karen sat on the far side, arms crossed tightly, staring at the floor. She looked smaller, like she wasn't sure how things got so far. When she finally looked up and saw me, she exhaled sharply, like she already knew this wasn't going to go her way. The board president began, "We're here to review several violations and complaints regarding misuse of property, harassment, and abuse of HOA position." Her lips tightened. They asked me to speak first. I explained everything clearly. No anger. No drama. Just the facts. How she parked in my garage repeatedly, how she dismissed my complaints, how she mocked me, how she filed fake violations, how she accused me of harassment, how the HOA ignored everything, how the truth only came out when the neighbor showed the video, and finally, how the HOA needed to do better. Every board member listened closely. Some looked embarrassed. Then they turned to her. Karen tried to explain, and failed. She started with, "I didn't do anything wrong. He overreacted." One board member asked calmly, "Why were you parking in his garage?" She hesitated. Just a tiny pause. But it said everything. "I didn't think he would mind. But he confronted you multiple times. Why did you continue?" Karen's voice cracked. "Because there was nowhere else to park. My son was visiting, I needed space, the street was full, I didn't think it mattered that much." A board member replied, "But it wasn't your property. You trespassed repeatedly. And your behavior afterward escalated the situation." She had no answer. Just silence. Then they brought up the video. The board member turned to the screen and played it. Everyone watched quietly as Karen parked inside my garage, closed the door, walked out confidently, and said, "He won't say anything." When the video ended, the room stayed silent for several long seconds. It was the first time I saw her look genuinely embarrassed. Her face went red. Her eyes stayed glued to the table. The board president finally spoke, "This is clear evidence of intentional misuse of property. And it contradicts every statement you've made to us." Karen whispered something, but no one heard it. The decision, after a short private discussion, the board returned. The president read the decision aloud. Karen was removed from her HOA subcommittee position. She received the maximum fine allowed for unauthorized property use. She was placed on behavioral probation for 1 year. Any future complaints would be taken directly to a city mediator. Her past fake violations against me were officially erased. The HOA issued a formal apology to me for not taking my concerns seriously, and then they did something I never expected. They revised a rule. A brand new policy. No board member or resident may use another resident's property without written consent. Violations will result in immediate penalties. It was literally written because of this situation. My name was on the amendment proposal. My case changed the rules. Karen looked defeated. Not angry. Not defensive. Just tired. After the meeting, I walked outside. A few neighbors came up to me, patting me on the back. "You did good. About time someone stopped her. You handled it better than any of us would." As I was about to leave, I saw Karen walking toward her car. For a moment, we locked eyes. I expected another insult, another glare, another storm. Instead, she quietly said, "I'm sorry." No excuses. No attitude. Just a tired, honest apology. I nodded. Not because I forgave everything instantly, but because it felt like the end of a long, unnecessary fight. Sometimes closure doesn't come from a big dramatic moment. Sometimes it's a simple sentence spoken by someone who finally understands the consequences of their actions. Life after the drama, the neighborhood became quieter, calmer, more normal. I stopped getting violations. People were friendlier. The HOA actually started listening to residents. And my garage? Always empty. Always mine. No more surprises. Do I feel like I won? Maybe not in the dramatic way revenge stories usually end. But I got something better. My peace. My boundaries. And my respect in the community. And for the first time since moving in, I felt like I finally belonged there.